This podcast is an invitation to feel and experience the souls of famous old Hollywood homes and to have an in-depth journey to the areas where they're located through interviews with longtime residents. Either you're a fan of old Hollywood in Los Angeles, planning to have a vacation, or, an even bigger step, considering a certain area for your future home. This is your opportunity to receive valuable information and insightful advice you won't find anywhere else.
Hello, and welcome to my podcast. Are you in the mood for California? Today, we'll delve into the architectural aesthetic of Richard Neutra, gaining a unique perspective on Los Angeles and valuable insights into his father's work from the esteemed Dr. Raymond Neutra.
But of course, I grew up in the Silver Lake district where my father, after he got this famous loan from Kees van der Leeuw, the Dutch industrialist and modernist, that he was able to find a 60 by 70 foot lot next to the Silver Lake Reservoir, which is situated in a valley with hills around it. On the very tops of the hills were some pretty elaborate estates, but on the sides and down around the lake, really rather modest houses. And so I grew up in a live-work multi-household structure, which was a case study in how to accommodate three different households plus a small architectural office on this very small lot between Silver Lake Boulevard on the one side and a quiet residential street, Edgewater Terrace, on the other.
Masha Korpacheva is a California-based realtor and a member of the National Association of Realtors in Los Angeles. She's an advocate for selling and buying homes with soul and practicing mindfulness in real estate. With master's degrees in spiritual psychology and linguistics, Masha brings all of her skills to work with her clients. An intuit and empath, she has touched many lives with her outstanding ability to see beyond the visible and helping to come to better understanding of issues and their resolutions. An adventurous world traveler, from climbing Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania to exploring the Galapagos Islands, Masha has a particular passion for the City of Angels. Having landed in this paradise and adopted it as her home, she's been sharing old Hollywood stories since 2007. In the mood for California, feel the soul of old Hollywood.
And now, are you ready to experience the architecture of Richard Neutra? Richard Neutra, a luminary in mid-century modern architecture, left an indelible mark on the architectural landscape by redefining the relationship between human beings and their built environments. His philosophy went beyond mere aesthetics. It was a profound exploration into the intricate interplay of mind, body, and space. Born in Vienna, Neutra's journey to Los Angeles in 1925 was fueled by inspiration from American architectural giants like Frank Lloyd Wright. Despite a brief stint at Taliesin, Neutra forged his path in California, prioritizing personalized design over stylistic conventions. While others stuck to old-fashioned rules, he dared to question the idea of just copying past styles, breaking away from the architectural norms of his time. He believed real architectural greatness wasn't about following trends blindly. Instead, he pushed for a new way of thinking, where architects used scientific principles from fields like psychology, biology, and neuroscience to guide their designs. Neutra avidly studied how the human central nervous system processed various stimuli such as space, light, smell, and textures, viewing them as integral components of architectural design. By synthesizing scientific advancements with architectural practice, Neutra sought to create environments that not only appealed visually, but also fostered a sense of well-being and comfort. Central to Neutra's approach was his unwavering dedication to understanding the genuine needs of his clients. Unlike architects who imposed their artistic visions onto projects, Neutra took a collaborative approach, engaging clients in detailed discussions and utilizing questionnaires to uncover their preferences and lifestyles. This client-centric philosophy ensured that each of his designs was a bespoke reflection of its inhabitants, blending artistry with practicality and comfort. He developed the concept of the ready-for-anything plan, a flexible, adaptable design that prioritized open, multifunctional living spaces. Neutra envisioned homes that could seamlessly accommodate various life events and evolving needs, embodying a forward-thinking approach to domestic architecture. His breakthrough project, the Lovell Health House, exemplified his commitment to innovation. It was the first all-steel residential structure in the US, and its meticulous construction garnered acclaim, propelling Neutra to architectural stardom almost overnight. The VDL House, funded by Dutch industrialist C.H. van der Loof, showcased Neutra's penchant for simplicity and functionality. With an inward-facing design and a striking roof terrace, it embodied his vision of integrated living and work spaces. The Kaufmann Desert House epitomizes Neutra's mastery in blending modernist design principles with the desert landscape, characterized by clean lines, expansive glass walls, and seamless integration with nature. The Kaufmann Desert House is a testament to the architect's commitment to creating harmonious living spaces that resonate with their surroundings. Its elegance and thoughtful design continue to captivate admirers and serve as a beacon of mid-century modern architecture. Richard Neutra's legacy still resonates profoundly with architects and designers, speaking to the essence of creating spaces that truly embrace and elevate the human life, prioritizing people's needs and experiences. His synthesis of nature, innovation, and timeless aesthetic evokes a sense of warmth and inspiration, reminding architects to infuse their designs with genuine care and empathy. In Neutra's work, we find not just buildings, but expressions of the soul, capturing the essence of human existence and beckoning us into a deeper understanding of who we are. And here we are. Welcome to Los Angeles. I'm so honored to have Dr. Raymond Neutra here with me. Dr. Raymond Neutra is the youngest son of Richard Neutra. After a public health career in environmental medicine and epidemiology at several universities and the California Department of Public Health, he has been drawn back to the legacy of his father and brother. He has been active in the preservation of the Neutra VDL studio and residences and several other Neutra projects. He is an ambassador for the iconic House Network and has written scholarly articles on his father's career. In addition to preservation, he endorses the Neutra commitment to socially and ecologically responsible design inspired by evidence. Please check out the website for the Neutra Institute for Survival Through Design at www.neutra.org. Today, Dr. Neutra will share his unique perspective on Los Angeles and valuable insights into his father's work. Hello, Dr. Neutra.
Hello there. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm very good. It's sunny up here in Monterey.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I was really looking forward to our conversation today, and I believe you have so much to share about yourself and about your famous father. So it is very, very special for me to be speaking with you today.
I'm happy to do it.
Thank you very much. So, my first question will be about the city of Los Angeles. Maybe you could share your unique perspective on our city, envisioning it maybe as an introduction for someone who has never seen our city before. How would you describe it?
Very varied, many different separate neighborhoods, which are affected by ranges of hills that go through the valley. It was a city that grew around streetcar tracks, which extended all the way from Pomona all the way to the ocean. And then in the 50s, these were taken out, and then it became a automobile city. I actually, even though I was born in Los Angeles, I was away at boarding school for much of the time and really didn't live there as an adult until I came back to Los Angeles in the mid 70s and taught at UCLA, and then lived in the Westwood district. But of course, I grew up in the Silver Lake district, where my father, after he got this famous loan from Kees van der Leeuw, the Dutch industrialist and modernist, that he was able to find a 60 by 70-foot lot next to the Silver Lake Reservoir, which is situated in a valley with hills around it. On the very tops of the hills were some pretty elaborate estates, but on the sides and down around the lake, really rather modest houses. And so I grew up in a live-work multi-household structure, which was a case study in how to accommodate three different households plus a small architectural office on this very small lot between Silver Lake Boulevard on the one side and a quiet residential street, Edgewater Terrace, on the other. So it faces two streets.
Very interesting. And what was it like living in a household like this?
I came 12 years after my next oldest brother. So by the time I was 10, he was a young adult. He was in the U.S. Navy in World War II. And then after a year at USC, he went off to Zurich to study at the technical university there for a year. So I grew up around adults. I would wander through this small architectural office with the architect sitting on their gray metal stools with their T-squares and triangles drawing. And these were people from all over the world. Sergei Koshin from Russia, Ben Fischer from Poland, Toby Schmidbauer from Germany, people from South America. So I was used to eavesdropping on the client conferences in the evenings up in the living room and going on photo shoots with Julius Schulman and my father when projects were finished. And my job was to push the owner's furniture out of the way and put some Neutra furniture in the photos.
That is very funny. Well, that must have affected you in your life in some way, growing up in such an atmosphere of creativity and so many adults discussing, design and architecture and many various other interesting questions. So would you say it affected you?
I would be invited along to dinners, and these would be served on trays that my father had designed in the upstairs living room. And often they were people not just from the design world, but also from biology. My father was very interested in the biological impacts of design. So there were physicians and researchers and neuroscientists and conversations that I would hear, and lively conversation, intellectual conversation. So I was lucky to be surrounded by very accomplished and very focused adults. And when I read my father's new book in 1954, Survival Through Design, I decided that I would be a research physician. And I thought in neuroscience, because that was so much that was being written there, and it was so interesting to me. So I ended up indeed going into medicine. And then I discovered that the laboratory work that I thought I would do wasn't really didn't set my personality. I'm not such a disciplined person in that particular way. And at one point, I decided that I would explore medical anthropology. And I got a job as a medical student working with a medical anthropologist and a psychologist on the Navajo reservation, interviewing Navajo patients with epilepsy and Navajo patients with what's called hysteria, which is thought to be a psychological condition. And the idea was that maybe the particular kind of symptoms would be influenced by the culture. And while I was doing that on a summer, I discovered that I could satisfy my military obligations by working with the U.S. Public Health Service. So after I graduated and did my internship at McGill University in Montreal, my wife and I came and I worked for 2 years as a general practitioner on the Navajo reservation about 60 miles due east of Gallup, New Mexico, out in the desert, along with 4 other young physicians, all in uniform. I was sent off to a training in tuberculosis control, which was one of the jobs that I had there, and discovered epidemiology. We had a day devoted to that. And in the morning, we studied and discussed an article in which in Bangladesh, tuberculosis patients were randomized between being sent away to a sanatorium in the city, or they stayed in their village and a barefoot doctor came and visited them every day and delivered tuberculosis antibiotics to them to take. And then they compared how these 2 treatments, what the results were. And it turned out that the patients who stayed home actually had a better cure rate. They were much more satisfied. It was beneficial that their family was not disrupted by having a mother or father sent away. And of course, it was less expensive. And this kind of exemplified the kind of thinking that my father had in architecture, that you should pay attention to what worked and what didn't work, and that you should be striving for solutions that were available to everybody, not just the most wealthy people. So the values of public health very much aligned with the kind of values that I grew up with my mother and his partner, my mother, who was very much involved with the Neutra practice.
Very interesting. And I would ask you to elaborate a little bit more on the parallels between medicine and architecture in terms of creativity, problem solving, or approach to complex systems, because you just mentioned that, you learned it from your father to pay attention to what works and what doesn't work and to look for solutions. And besides that, are there any other parallels that you learned from your father, or maybe you discovered on your own when already working in medicine? So what are the parallels between architecture and medicine?
Well, I'm making the parallel more between public health and the particular kind of architecture that my father was interested in. You could say that there's some architects who specialize in very dramatic and expensive projects. That was what architects did, right? They would design St. Peter's or the Taj Mahal. And that kind of practice is maybe more related to open heart surgery, dramatic, very expensive, specialized productions. But my father was interested in the design of things like schools, libraries, apartment houses, and low-cost housing. So that maps more onto public health in that it's looking for strategies that can be widely applied. If that is the case, then sometimes you have to advocate doing things that oppose the usual habits of people. So, for example, in World War I, the cigarette companies gave free cigarettes to the soldiers and basically addicted a whole generation of young people to smoking. And during my career in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, we had 4 decades of strategies to try and turn around those habits that people had, which were leading to lung cancer and other lung diseases. And this involves paying attention to the stakeholders who have an interest and don't have an interest in continuing this kind of behavior, and many different ways to restructure things in such a way that the habit is generally changed. Well, it was similar for my father, that he had economic ways of designing low-cost housing, but they looked different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or that they would have more of an emphasis of letting in natural light, and those kind of windows look different than the kind of windows that people made when they had to build houses out of brick and didn't have the ability to have large spans of open window to get natural light in. So there was that familiarity with this problem of having a new solution that might have some resistance in the public, and yet once it was adopted would be seen as beneficial, but you had to make change. Another issue was that in these complex projects, you had to have many different disciplines working together. So when I headed up a research division on environmental and occupational health in the California Department of Public Health, I worked with toxicologists, physicians, statisticians, epidemiologists, people who were expert in measuring what people were exposed to. For example, in children who were exposed to lead paint and dust or mold in the air and so forth. So that working with across disciplines in public health is similar to what architects who have to deal with engineers and experts in lighting and landscape architects and so forth working together as a team. And that requires a whole set of skills that are important both in certain kinds of architecture and in public health.
Right, right. It totally makes sense. No, yeah, I can see that. And Dr. Neutra, reflecting on your father's architectural legacy, maybe there are some specific projects or principles of his work that resonate with you personally.
Well, the Neutra Institute, which has taken on new life after the very generous bequest of my late brother Dion Neutra of 3 apartment containing structures in the Silver Lake district of LA, has reminded us that even though my father is mostly known for wonderful single family dwellings, in fact, he was fascinated by the challenge of multi-household structures. And there are 15 of such projects in the Neutra practice, of which we have 3. So we're lucky that these 3 apartment containing structures are occupied. So we have the income to be able to maintain these historic structures. The bad news is that people can't often go inside. And so we have QR codes on the outside of the buildings with virtual walkthroughs of certain spaces that have become vacant for a while, and also instructional short videos that explain what the design tactics of these apartments have, that create certain physiological benefits or make possible certain ways of socializing that, if they hadn't been designed that way, would not have been so easy. So the tradition of apartment and social housing designs integrated with landscape designs and very much oriented to the sun and local climate is certainly one legacy, not only in how things were solved, but the fact that certain problems were identified as worthy of being solved and will continue to be worthy problems, even under situations as different as living on a moon colony. So the other area is school design. Some of his earliest designs were indoor-outdoor schools, and he designed 8 such schools, and one of them, the UCLA Laboratory School, built in 1958, is at the current moment being evaluated on how it's performing, both in terms of, because it's an indoor-outdoor school, about the ventilation and the temperature control, how it performed during the COVID epidemic, because many of the classes could be held outdoors. And so the school design is also a major legacy. Then particularly early on, the houses and the projects that were built, such as the one that I grew up in, were innovative in trying to use new materials that were economic and trying to discover how aesthetically they could be revealed in the design of the buildings. And so today we still see lots of innovation in that spirit. And particularly as we're starting to think about low carbon footprint, we're starting thinking about building things in such a way that they can be recycled and reused and not thrown away when they no longer are useful. All those kinds of thoughts are part of that a legacy of thoughtful design.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like how you say thoughtful design. It's almost like every little detail was taken care of. Every little thing was thought of. And there was basically no room for any errors. It is really, really interesting. And the impact that your father had on California and Los Angeles specifically is immense. So maybe you could speak a little bit about, your father's work that he had on shaping the architectural identity of our city.
So he began work in the late 20s, and some of the young architects that came to work with him, like Harwell Harris and Gregory Ain and Rafael Soriano, then went on to their own careers in the 30s. Then young architects that were studying in the late 30s, and then, of course, many of them went off to war. When they came back after World War II, you have an explosion of what's now called mid-century modern design.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that continued in commercial projects and in schools and in apartments. The orientation, which is possible in California and in many Mediterranean climate countries of indoors and outdoors, something that my father and particularly his somewhat older colleague Rudolf Schindler really opened the door to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that led to a whole industry of sliding glass doors, which was
Yes.
which they were the first to use.
Very, very interesting. Well, beyond Richard Neutra's architectural achievements, what would you say were some of his maybe personal qualities that you believe defined him? And how do you think they might have influenced his approach to design?
He had a combination of being very sensitive and receptive and yet also a tremendous promoter. He had his ups and downs, and particularly when he was up, he was very engaging and he was very passionate about this kind of design. So he was a tremendous networker. He was in contact with all the major architects of his generation, such as Walter Gropius and Mies van der Rohe and Alvar Aalto and Le Corbusier and many of the architects in Central Europe and South America and Asia as well. So he was very active in the International Congress of Modern Architecture, the United States main representative. And so he was a tremendous proselytizer and networker. He was also extremely knowledgeable about landscape architecture and the relationship between architecture and the landscape and the environment. Very interested in passive temperature control through paying attention to how a place was passively ventilated and developing devices to adapt to when the sun was shining and when it wasn't, with louvers and awnings and overhangs and orientation and so forth.
Wow, very interesting. Wow. Were there any other interesting qualities about him? Like, what was he like as a person? Because, everybody absolutely loves his designs. And at home, was he still that sensitive and receptive, or was he a little different in household?
My mother used to comment that he was a completely different person when they were off traveling and away from the pressures of the office. When he was at home, he was extremely industrious and working all the time and rather harassed, I would say, because he had so many things on his plate and he was trying to get them all done. But then when they would travel, and then a few times when I traveled with him, he was very playful and relaxed and adventurous. He would happy to deviate from the planned itinerary if something came up and he saw an opportunity for something interesting.
Oh, wonderful. So it must have been a lot of fun to travel with him.
I have some fond memories of that, yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Dr. Neutra, my last question to you. How do you see your own contributions to the cultural landscape of California, considering both your medical career and any potential involvement or influence in architectural matters?
Well, I was happy to provide an environment for some very creative public health people in the California Department of Public Health. And as a professor of epidemiology, I had some distinguished students. I was very interested in, and our division was devoted to providing information that was unbiased and was seen as unbiased to allow people to make choices, to balance the risk of disease against the cost of avoiding it and other cultural values. We've seen this, for example, in the arguments about whether to close the schools during COVID or not. How do you balance the interference with education and isolation of children on the one hand and the risk of death or getting COVID or long COVID on the other? It's reasonable people can disagree on some of these things, and to provide information to stakeholders in society that have to make those difficult decisions was a real challenge. And we learned that it's something about the gestation period of coming to a decision. People have to ruminate over it, and they have to gain trust that the people who are providing information are doing it in an honest kind of way. And so that was in my public health career. I've been lucky since my retirement to get back more closely involved with preservation. I've been a member of a preservation group here in Monterey County and helped the restoration of the VDL studio residence early in the 2000s when it was falling into disrepair, and then trying to bring some of my knowledge of management and interaction with social stakeholders to devote that to the Neutra Institute. And we have this opportunity to not only do preservation work on archives and on buildings and republishing and working with many volunteers. For example, Neutra's owners have formed a Neutra Owners Network to share ideas about restoration and also interact with each other socially. So it's been a pretty creative time for an old guy at the end of his life to have the pleasure to work with a lot of energetic young people. So I feel lucky.
Beautiful, beautiful. It sounds like, what your father started in his own way, it, has been carried with your help further and further. And, your contribution to public health and all of your preservation work are, so honorable. And I'm sure your father would be very, very proud of you. So thank you so much for everything that you do.
Well, thank you for the interview.
And yes, I appreciate once again the time that you took to have this conversation with me. And I believe many people will be interested in, getting an insight into your personal work as being the son of Richard Neutra, and to find out a little bit more details about your father, whose impact on California is so tangible. And I'm sure it will continue spreading around the city because mid-century modern and economic ways of building houses and yet making them aesthetically beautiful and biologically as well adaptable has never been, more important than it is now.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neutra. I appreciate our conversation.
Okie doke. Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much for tuning in to feel and experience the architectural aesthetic of Richard Neutra with my special guest, Dr. Raymond Neutra. If you enjoy my podcast, In the Mood for California, please sign up for future episodes at your preferred platform and please leave your feedback. I really appreciate your time and support. You can follow me on Instagram at In the Mood for California and check out my website www.inthemoodforcalifornia.com. I'm a realtor with Beverly & Company Luxury Properties, and my license number is 019-78714. Selling and buying homes with soul is not just my real estate strategy. It is an intuitive and holistic approach that embraces your values, aspirations, and conscious intentions. If you want to discover the power of mindfulness in your real estate journey with my compassionate guidance, I'm here for you. Join me next time as we venture into the fascinating world of Bronson Canyon, rich with cinematic history. Cannot wait to explore it with you.
In the Mood for California. Feel the soul of Old Hollywood.